The lights dimmed, and the murmur of hundreds of young voices fell into an uneasy hush. Cameras flickered like restless fireflies across the packed auditorium. At the podium, Jim Jordan adjusted his tie and forced a grin that didn't reach his eyes. He leaned toward the microphone and declared almost theatrically, "Let's welcome Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett to the stage." Applause rippled, cautious at first, then scattered and uncertain. From the side curtain, Jasmine stepped forward, steady, unflinching, every movement deliberate. Her calm presence felt electric, the kind that doesn't shout, but commands. She smiled once, just enough to disarm the tension hanging in the air. Jordan watched her with folded arms, the smirk of a man confident in his script. The Youth Summit's theme was unity, but beneath the banner and slogans, the air pulsed with Bavelry. Phones lifted, live streams blinked to life. When Jasmine reached the microphone, she paused. The silence deepened, the kind that makes the crowd forget to breathe. One heartbeat, two. Then she began to speak, softly at first, her tone a mirror to calm waters hiding a storm. And in that instant, no one knew that this moment, born of a simple invitation, would soon shake the room to its core. The National Youth Leadership Summit was billed as a call for unity, a place where young Americans could bridge divides and shape the nation's future together. The stage backdrop screamed optimism, bold colors, oversized words like hope and courage. But behind the slogans, another story simmered. Jim Jordan's office had framed the event as bipartisan, yet leaked emails told a different tale. His staff had circulated notes hinting that this was his chance to test the rhetoric of certain rising Democrats. Days before the summit, social media caught fire. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Team Crockett and hashtag Jordan Summit trending side by side. TikToks debated who would win the stage. Opinion threads divided timelines like battle lines. Commentators called it a PR gamble and a setup dressed as civility. By the time the doors opened, everyone in that hall already knew this wasn't just a conversation, it was a showdown. The crowd reflected that tension, half eager, half skeptical. Students whispered, journalists angled their lenses, and staffers exchanged glances. Jordan sat center stage, playing the role of statesman, while Jasmine's chair remained empty for one last breath of anticipation. The internet had already chosen sides before anyone even took the stage. But what none of them realized, not the planners, not the pundits, not even Jim himself, was that this invitation, meant to control the narrative, was about to rewrite it entirely.
Jim Jordan had built his reputation not on calm persuasion, but on confrontation. His rise through Congress had been marked by a brand of political theater that turned hearings into headline reels. In one clip, he was red-faced, jabbing a finger across the table at a witness who refused to bend. In another, he leaned back in his chair, smirking as colleagues pleaded for civility. The camera loved his defiance, and he knew it. Each outburst earned him a fresh round of viral fame, another notch in the belt of political combat. He called it passion. Others called it performance. To his supporters, he was the fighter who never backed down. To his critics, he was the embodiment of arrogance in a tailored suit. His staffers learned to read the cues, the narrowing eyes before a verbal strike, the rehearsed pauses meant for the cameras. Every room was a ring, every exchange a match to be won. That same instinct followed him to the Youth Summit. The event promised dialogue, but for Jim, it was strategy. The students, the cameras, the opposing voice of Jasmine Crockett, each a prop in his latest act. While the summit's theme was bridging generations, Jim's unspoken goal was simpler: dominate the narrative before anyone else could. He believed confrontation revealed strength. Yet what he never understood was that true power could come from composure. For Jim, the stage was a battlefield. For Jasmine, it was a platform for truth. As the lights brightened and the murmurs grew, he straightened his posture, confident that this would be another easy performance, another moment of control. But beneath the hum of anticipation, a shift was coming. This time, the script would flip, and he would be the one caught off guard.
Before she was a congresswoman commanding national attention, Jasmine Crockett was just a girl from Dallas with a stubborn belief that fairness wasn't optional, it was owed. Her childhood unfolded between long days in classrooms that underestimated her and longer nights watching her mother stretch paychecks to make ends meet. She didn't grow up with privilege, she grew up with purpose. In law school, she studied under flickering library lights, fueled by coffee and conviction. While others chased prestige, Jasmine chased justice. She took on clients no one else would touch, the poor, the marginalized, the silenced, and built her name not through power, but through principle. In crowded courtrooms, she learned that truth didn't always shout. Sometimes it simply refused to bow. As her career grew, so did the resistance she faced. She was interrupted, mislabeled, underestimated, but each dismissal sharpened her resolve. She carried herself with the quiet defiance of someone who had been told no too many times and turned every one into a reason to keep going. Her empathy became her weapon, her story her armor. When she stepped into politics, she didn't come to play the game. She came to change the rules. Her speeches didn't sound like slogans. They sounded like people. So when the invitation arrived from Jim Jordan's office, Jasmine didn't see a trap. She saw an opportunity, a stage to speak to the generation that would inherit the consequences of today's arrogance. And on that morning, at the Youth Summit, as she walked toward the blinding lights and restless cameras, she wasn't just carrying her resume or her reputation. She was carrying the weight of every young woman told she was too loud, too ambitious, too much. And though she didn't know it yet, that truth, her truth, was about to dismantle the arrogance of power.
The lights flared to full brightness, washing the stage in a glare that left no shadow to hide in. Jim Jordan opened with his trademark grin, voice steady but edged with sarcasm. "We're honored today," he said, "to hear from Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, someone who's never been shy about telling us how America should run." Laughter rippled through part of the audience, polite but uneasy. Jasmine smiled faintly, hands folded, her expression unreadable. He launched into questions that sounded polite on paper, but dripped with challenge. Do you believe activism sometimes goes too far? Isn't respect for tradition what truly unites us? Each phrase was a dart wrapped in diplomacy. Jasmine listened, nodding, not rising to the bait. The room grew quieter with each question, the students sensing that something more than discussion was unfolding. Jordan pressed harder. "Some of us think too many young people today prefer outrage to effort. Would you agree, Congresswoman?" His tone sharpened, the grin fading into control. Cameras zoomed in on his face, then on hers, still calm, still waiting. A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone whispered, "She's not taking it." Another voice, "She's waiting." The tension was a living thing now, heavy and electric. Finally, Jasmine leaned forward. Her hand adjusted the microphone with a quiet grace that somehow demanded silence. For the first time that morning, Jordan stopped speaking. Every eye turned toward her, every camera fixed. She took one breath, slow and deliberate. Then she spoke. Just a few words at first, but her tone carried the weight of generations, the kind of steadiness that makes arrogance feel small. Whatever came next, the room already knew. The balance of power had just shifted, and her next sentence would make history.
Jasmine's voice entered the silence like a steady current. "I'm not here to debate who loves America more," she began, her tone calm but resonant. "I'm here to ask, who loves it enough to tell the truth about it?" The words landed softly but cut deep. A few students in the front row exchanged glances. Others leaned forward, their phones momentarily forgotten. Jordan blinked, his smirk faltering. Jasmine continued, her cadence unhurried, every sentence building on the last. "You talk about tradition," she said, turning toward him, "as if it's something fragile that needs protection. But the truth is, tradition doesn't break, it evolves. It becomes stronger when it learns from its flaws, the same way this country does." The audience was silent except for the clicking of camera shutters. Jasmine's eyes swept across the sea of young faces. "You ask if activism goes too far, but I've watched what happens when it doesn't go far enough. When people stay quiet because they're told it's not the right time to speak, or the right tone to use, or the right person to say it. I was told all those things once, and still, I spoke." Her voice rose slightly, carrying conviction rather than anger. "Patriotism isn't obedience, it's accountability. Love of country means wanting it to live up to its own promise." Jordan shifted in his seat, adjusting his microphone though it hadn't moved. His usual interjections didn't come. The control he wore so comfortably began to slip. The crowd sensed it. Jasmine turned to him fully now, her words transforming from defense to revelation. "You say you want unity, but unity built on silence isn't unity, it's surrender. You call it respect for tradition, I call it fear of change. And if the next generation sitting here today learns anything from this conversation, I hope it's that real leadership doesn't mean talking over people. It means listening, even when the truth makes you uncomfortable." The audience murmured, low at first, then rising like a tide. A few students started to clap before stopping, unsure if it was allowed. Jordan tried to regain footing. "With all due respect, Congresswoman." She interrupted him, not with volume, but with clarity. "Respect isn't what you say when you want to dismiss someone. It's what you show when you finally hear them." The room fell still again. Even the sound technicians froze at the back of the hall. Jasmine's eyes softened now, carrying the weight of empathy that had always defined her. "When I was growing up, I was told this country wasn't built for people like me to lead in rooms like this. But every time someone told me that, I remembered the people who built it anyway. The ones whose hands laid the bricks, whose sweat watered the soil, whose stories were erased but whose work never was. That's who I think of when I speak of America." She turned her gaze to the audience, scanning the rows of students whose faces reflected awe, curiosity, and something deeper, recognition. "You are the generation that doesn't owe deference to arrogance. You don't have to shrink to fit anyone's idea of respectability. Your voice matters more than their noise. Your courage is the one tradition that's always worth protecting." Jordan leaned back, his jaw set, his eyes darting toward the cameras that had now fixed on him instead. His confidence had curdled into discomfort, his practiced grin slipping entirely. Jasmine let the silence stretch for a breath, letting the weight of her words settle. Then she looked back at him, her expression composed but resolute. "You wanted to talk about who's proud of this country? I am, because I still believe it can be better, and that belief, Congressman, is what patriotism actually looks like." The first clap came from somewhere in the middle rows, a sharp, defiant sound, then another. Within seconds, the room erupted. Applause thundered through the hall, students rising to their feet, some with tears in their eyes, others recording through trembling hands. Jordan attempted to smile, but the cameras had already caught the moment, the hesitation, the unease, the silent admission of defeat. Jasmine didn't gloat. She simply stepped back from the podium, nodding once toward the audience. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice almost drowned by the ovation. And as she turned to leave the stage, the lights glinting off the corners of her eyes, something remarkable happened. Even her critics stood. No one could quite explain why, but they all knew what they had just witnessed. When she finished, even her critics couldn't clap fast enough.
By sunrise, the speech had already left the confines of that auditorium and detonated across the internet. Clips flooded TikTok, sliced into perfect 15-second bursts of conviction. One clip showed Jasmine saying, "Patriotism isn't obedience, it's accountability." Another captured her final line, "That belief, Congressman, is what patriotism actually looks like." Within hours, they were everywhere. News feeds, group chats, late-night shows. Hashtags ignited like wildfire. Hashtag Crockett taught them. Truth in Heels. Youth Summit 2025. On X, timelines blurred into a stream of disbelief and pride. One post read, "She spoke for us all," gathering 1 million likes in a day. A teacher uploaded her students watching the clip in class. They cheered when Jasmine leaned into the mic. Reaction videos piled up. Young women with tears in their eyes, young men grinning and shaking their heads, mouthing, "She did that." Commentators rushed to frame the moment. Cable hosts called it a generational pivot. Pundits on the right stumbled for footing, insisting Jordan had been gracious in defeat, though the footage said otherwise. Even the morning political shows, usually allergic to consensus, agreed on one thing: something genuine had happened. The Youth Summit's organizers released a statement calling Jasmine's words a triumph of dialogue, though everyone knew dialogue hadn't been the story. Dignity had. By evening, celebrities were quoting her lines, journalists were naming her the voice that redefined patriotism, and the clip had surpassed 10 million views. But it wasn't the numbers that mattered. It was the way people described what they felt watching it. A mix of relief, pride, and hope that decency could still command a room. As millions replayed her words, the noise of outrage faded for a rare, quiet moment. Across screens and timelines, the country seemed to agree they had just witnessed a moment of truth.
Long after the applause faded, Jasmine's words lingered like a soft echo beneath the noise of the news cycle. Reporters dissected the moment. Pundits replayed the exchange. But what people remembered wasn't the debate. It was the dignity. Her calm in the face of condescension had spoken louder than any raised voice ever could. That night, the clip ended with her final words. Dignity doesn't need a microphone. It echoes through actions. It became a mantra repeated in classrooms, reposted in captions, whispered in spaces where people had long felt unheard. Her poise had turned resistance into grace, and grace into a kind of quiet revolution. The narrator's voice returned, low and steady. In an age of noise, one calm voice reminded us that truth still carries power. The camera, in the mind's eye, tightened on Jasmine as she stepped off that stage, not triumphant, not boastful, but fulfilled. The applause followed her into the wings, rolling like waves, then dissolving into a silence that felt sacred. Leadership, she proved, isn't measured by who dominates the microphone, but by who dares to speak with purpose. It's not about winning the argument, it's about elevating the conversation. And somewhere in that audience, a young woman watched her walk away and thought, maybe I can do that too. Because when one woman stands tall against arrogance, the next generation learns how to rise. Moments like this remind us why truth still matters. In a world that rewards outrage, it takes courage to answer arrogance with calm, to meet division with dignity. Jasmine Crockett didn't just speak that day, she reminded us what leadership looks like when it comes from conviction, not ego. If you believe voices like hers deserve to be heard, share this video, subscribe, join the movement, and stand for the kind of strength that uplifts instead of tears down. Because the more we amplify truth, the harder it becomes to silence it. As the final echoes of applause fade, remember, change doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it begins with one voice, steady, clear, unafraid. One honest voice can change everything.